If you are an Indian family in Texas and you're wondering about whether to put your home in a revocable living trust, then this video is for you. A lot of times on the internet, we hear all the advantages of a revocable living trust, but we rarely hear about what are some of the disadvantages of a revocable living trust, or what are some of the downsides of a revocable living trust. In this video, I'm going to be giving you two downsides to a revocable living trust. So let's get started. The first downside to a revocable living trust is the expense involved and maybe even the paperwork involved. Living trusts, they generally are a little more expensive to do than the will, because the corresponding reason for that is because there's more paperwork to do when you are doing a revocable living trust. Now, because these things are not free, you have to pay for them. So I think that is one downside to a revocable living trust. Although, it is arguable that if you just went with a will as opposed to a trust, then if you would have to get the will probated at some point. You'll have to take the will to the local probate court, and that would involve court fee, attorney fee, and so on. And so I think in the back end, the cost may be the same or even more, depending on several factors. So I think that's the first kind of disadvantage of a revocable living trust, in that there is upfront cost that is involved. Number two, there is no asset protection that you get with a revocable living trust. A lot of people think, I'm just going to put it in a trust and I'm good. Like this, nobody will ever be able to touch this asset ever. But that's not the full truth, because think of the revocable living trust like a box, right? And it's a box for which you have the key. So you can put properties in, you can take properties out, you have control over that particular box, you have custody over that particular box. You can revoke that living trust altogether if you want, you can amend it, you can do what you want. So the law says that, look, since you exercise this level of control, this level of custody over the properties that are within the box, we are not going to allow you to have asset protection over it. Now, contrast this with an irrevocable living trust, or an irrevocable, it's an irrevocable trust. Or with an irrevocable trust, you will not be able to kind of take properties out as and when you want. There are a few escape clauses, but generally speaking, it's much more difficult to take out properties from an irrevocable trust. So therefore, the law recognizes that and says, you know what, it's not totally under your control, not totally under your custody. So therefore, we are going to give you asset protection for a irrevocable trust, but for a revocable trust, we are not going to give you any asset protection. So now when you're considering the difference between like whether to go for a will, to go for a trust, I guess one of the disadvantages of living trust is that you don't get asset protection. Now, if you look at your options, if you just do a will, even that does not give you asset protection. So I guess that's still a downside. It is a disadvantage that you don't get asset protection with a revocable living trust. But having said so, I think it's also important to kind of at least consider what are the advantages of a revocable living trust. Why do people set up a revocable living trust, even with, I guess, both these disadvantages in place? And if I think a couple of just quick benefits is, number one, a revocable living trust avoids probate. In some states, it's straightforward probate, some states it's not. Probate will definitely involve court involvement, lawyer involvement, court fee, lawyer fee. And, I guess when you put grieving family members together in a courtroom with lawyers, judges, I guess, what could go wrong? If anybody goes out and challenges the will because they don't like what they get, that could just turn into a total massive fight, could blow up costs, could blow up expenses, but that may also not happen. So, that's, I think, one of the biggest disadvantages, or one of the biggest advantages of a living trust is that you get to avoid probate. Number two, you get privacy, and that, I think, in my book at least, that's a big deal. Where if I leave money to my own kids, I don't want any third party finding out how much money I've given to my kids. I mean, think of it like if you're going to a party, or where you're meeting people at a social gathering. It's not okay to kind of ask people how much money do you make, how much money are you, giving to your kids, and so on. Just because you've passed away, I don't think it's okay that people find out how much money your kids have gotten, and there could be some really bad outcomes. I've recently heard from a colleague that there were these real estate investors who would go look at probate court records and try to find if your children live out of state, then they would just kind of give them a lowball offer just to kind of get the property off their hands and make it look like as though they're doing a favor. And any predator out there, any creditors out there, you just don't want that information to be shared with any third party. Reason number 3 is that you get asset protection for kids. So, think about this. Let's say, I have 2 kids, Dev and Dia. They're still minors. If something were to happen to me and my wife tomorrow, I definitely do not want that money just to go to them outright. And because if the money went to them outright, first of all, they would not know what to do with that money. And in Texas, for example, there is, a Texas judge is going to appoint a guardian to kind of take care of that money till they become 18. And when they're 18, guess what? They just inherit a couple of $1 million. And that's usually not the outcome that most people want. So people set up something called a lifetime asset protection trust or something called a children's trust for their kids. And, that's one of the options is instead of giving them everything lump sum at one time, you could kind of stagger it. You can give, say, 1/3 at 25, 1/3 at 30, 1/3 at 35. That way they kind of get more financial maturity before they receive the money. And without a children's trust, that is something that you cannot do. So I think that is one of the other advantages of having a revocable living trust. I think the 4th advantage of a revocable living trust is that, if you go through probate, basically you're giving a forum for anybody to come and challenge the will. I mean, all these legalists are there already in court. There's already a forum for them to go out and challenge any provision that they don't have, because papers are already given to them because they are part of the court proceedings. On the other hand, with the revocable living trust, things are not, there's no duty to kind of serve papers on everybody. So I think the moment you go to probate court, there is a chance that people may just try to litigate it out. So is a living trust perfect? Is it for everyone? Well, I think if you have minor kids, if you have assets in multiple states and in multiple countries, like in India and the US, I think it would be highly advisable to at least look at creating a trust. It's basically like, you get or your kids get a red carpet service after you're gone. So those are my 2 cents about the disadvantages and also a little bit about the advantages of a revocable living trust. If you want more information on how to protect your family if you have properties both in India and Texas, download the Desi Family Estate Planning Checklist. You can find the link on my channel page.